4:33. I'd like to welcome you guys to the meeting. This is the Abington Fire Station Building Committee meeting. It's Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. We're going to be doing this via remote participation. And the agenda for today is going to be reviewing and discussing the feasibility study, along with a Q&A with Kessel Blues Associates, KBA. After that, we can discuss a possible recommendation to present to the Board of Selectmen, and then we will set a date for our next meeting. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome everybody here. We waited a while to get this study in, and it's a pretty large study. It's 280 pages. So I did get everybody a digital copy of it as soon as I could, and I hope everybody had a chance to review it. So I kind of want to just go through and see if anybody has any initial comments that we can go ahead and start discussing.
As far as what recommendations do we need to make to the Board of Selectmen? Location or?
Ideally, yeah, location and maybe a general design layout or initial cost. The costs were all generally in the same ballpark. Really, it's going to be down to the decision on the location. This is only because they need to figure out what their next steps are as far as town meeting goes and what's going to go on there, and if this is going to move forward that way. Everything's kind of unknown at this time, so we just wanted to review it and come up with a direct plan. We would be going to discuss. The Board of Selectmen and the town manager all got a copy of this. I don't think they've had a chance to really read it as much as maybe we have, but we'll hopefully be able to get with them for their next meeting to present them with a recommendation and just answer any questions they may have. Anybody else have anything they want to discuss on that?
So Derek, is KBA going to make a presentation to us here, an overview of the study, or how are we going to proceed?
So yeah, they do have the study that they're going to be able to put up for the screen for us to go over. And I don't know if it's a formal presentation, but it's more of a, as we go through it, I figured we could kind of start at the beginning and work our way through each section. They'd be able to answer any of the questions that we had, tell us their recommendations verbally. How it all kind of went through, because it is a lot of information to process. So
yeah, from my own perspective, I think that the report clearly demonstrates that there is a great need within the community to improve our fire services facilities. I don't think we need to go through and talk about the condition of the main station and the substation, because I think we've talked about that a lot. I think we're all believers. It's good that the information is available so that the people in town who maybe are not as educated as everyone on this video is about that, that it would be available to them, also available to the selectmen or anybody else. And I think, from my perspective, I think we should almost start at, okay, here are the 5 sites. The recommendation is that the committee considers 2 sites. We go through the pros, the cons, which are outlined in the report, and then we start looking at the cost, and then we make some kind of a recommendation. But that's just my point of view. I mean, I'm happy to go with the will of the committee.
No, I think that's great. It is a lot to go through the old parts of the part of the study that reviews headquarters station and station 2 and the current conditions of it. It's very thorough. And like you said, we all did kind of discuss, and we all understand that there is a need for something new. So we do need to make this readily available for the public as soon as we can. But in an effort to kind of get to the decisions, what we have to do, we could kind of jump right in. And I'd like to welcome Sean and Todd and Dave. Sean and Todd are from KBA, and Sean is the the project manager, correct, Sean? That's going to be
Yeah.
answering our questions. So maybe if he would like to kind of just discuss off the top the initial recommendations of the study.
Yeah, sure. So if what I'll do here, I'll start sharing my screen in 1 second here. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I
Okay, great. So as you just mentioned, as Roger just mentioned, we got the 5 sites, which really, it talks about, this might be too small. Let me zoom in here. So you got the 5 sites. Obviously, you got the existing department site. We've got the existing fire station 2 site, and then the 3 sites that we kind of looked at per the feasibility study, North School, which was part of the RFQ. And then throughout this process, we looked at 714 Bedford Street, and then lastly, we looked at Glenwood's Way, which we kind of talked about at our last building committee meeting. But, real quickly, just to touch back on, obviously, the existing department location. It's a small site. Sorry, let me go to the page. Where is that? David could help me with that. Sorry. Okay, this is number 2.
Hey, Sean, you mind if I jump in just for a moment, if I could interrupt you?
Sure.
Thanks. Hi, folks. Again, Chief Nuttall. Again, thank everybody for being here on this committee. There's been a lot of work on this. Any of the residents that are watching, you haven't had the benefit of looking at the large document that we're all looking at now. So before we jump right into the recommendations and in some of the detailed screenshots that are included in this document, if I could just very, very quickly give a brief summary of what the document is to a lot of the residents that haven't seen it. It's a thick 280-page document, at least 280, and it's broken down really into 8 main parts that really looked at all aspects of the Abington Fire Department, the existing stations, and very quickly, I'm just going to read you the 8 main subgroups of this without getting into detail, just so any residents at home that are watching this, at least you have an idea what we're talking about before we jump into this portion. The first portion was just a brief executive summary of the whole thing in general. Then it broke down into a very detailed analysis of both existing fire stations, the structures of it, the mechanical issues, the limitations, recommended either repairs or improvements just over time, the size limitations that we have. After that, it gets into a summary of a space needs program, meaning what would the Abington Fire Department physically need for the equipment, the manpower, the number of personnel we have on duty at one time to really make that work. It's a space size of the station that we would need. We get into a very detailed response time study. There was a subcontractor that did an incredible analysis on response times from both the existing station locations as well as a couple different possible locations in the future if the town were to choose at some point to go there. We analyzed those sites in great detail, which we'll get into here. There were some project costs on this with a full menu of depending what the town may want to do if we move in this direction, depending on what is included in the station. If we explored looking at possibly including a couple other town departments, so they're in there, or we can have it without them. We've got a good breakdown menu of that. And then at the end, there's some large appendixes, and it really breaks down what a recommended fire station for Abington should look like, broken down with a basic floor plan. And that floor plan is then broken down into individual rooms throughout the entire facility. And basically that's what we started with that space needs program. We built all the individual rooms as needed, the chief's office, the fire prevention office, training rooms that we don't have, the apparatus floor to house the apparatus that we currently have, as well as trying to allow for some future growth. Because if we ever were to move into this project, we don't want to have this be built and then automatically have no room on it. There's room for expansion built into this. So in a nutshell, that is what this entire document has. And we'll make it available for people either online or I know they're working on that link, as well as some of the physical copies that we have limited copies of. But that's kind of what they're talking about. Now, if you can jump into some of the details on that, I just wanted to give the residents just a brief overview what this whole document is. Thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, no, it was great. Thanks. So obviously looking into the site, so, looking at the existing station, you have, it's maxed out pretty much the lot, the buildable area. So any addition, anything in the existing lot is really not feasible. Very similar to the Station 2. Again, this is your perimeter, or sorry, your property line, and then your buildable setback. So again, we're pretty much maxed out on here. So any sort of renovations or possibility of renovations or additions to this location is extremely difficult. After that, we looked at another property, 714 Bedford. At that time, this property was for sale. It was right along Route 18. It had some opportunity to build in around here in the middle of the site and edge of the site. But again, I believe now, correct me if I'm wrong though, Chief, but this property has sold. So from that, we jumped to part of the feasibility study, and the RFQ was to look at the North School site. Again, at the last building committee meeting, we analyzed it. We saw what was there. We looked at the grading. We looked at the existing setbacks. Obviously, looked at the existing building. We did some hazardous materials reports. Found out that there's hazardous materials. So all of those came into consideration on not only the design of the site, but obviously budgets and costs to look at what it would need to do to the site to put a new building on that property. And then lastly, we looked at the Glenowitz Way site. As we all know, it's down across by the high school and the middle schools, down by Town Hall. So we looked at this lastly, again, at our last building committee meeting. We talked about a couple of the options. We looked at, there's two separate lots. This lot here is the lot that is currently owned and by the Abington Housing Authority. And this lot at the rear here is a privately owned lot that there's been subsequent conversations with the landowner that they'd be willing to take a look, or whether it's a sale of the property to the town to build a new facility on this project. As we get a little bit further into the study, sorry, bear with me here. Take a second here to load up. So pros and cons of each of the sites. I don't know why my computer's freezing on me. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. So as we initially looked at it, we have these two sites that we feel that have adequate property, some more than others, but we kind of just did a really initial pros and cons of each of the sites that we're looking to recommend to not only yourselves, but the town of Abington to construct a new facility. Whether we go through every line item together, but some of the pros of the North School, it's centrally located along major arteries. It's town-owned property already. It's got some high-profile visibility of the town. It's a high ground, so drainage shouldn't be an issue. And then obviously has accessibility to public utilities and is easily accessible. Some of the cons on that site, there's going to be a lot of new traffic patterns that would increase some of the congestion of that area, which we touched on briefly last time. The size of the site, really, as we get in a little bit farther, you'll see how there's not much room for growth. We kind of max out the footprint of the building, as well as kind of take up all the usable space on the lot. Since it's located on a triangular type piece of property, there's no really backyard to the site. So, it's all public, and there's no really back of house area for the department. Four-way intersection may cause some heavier traffic and some accidents. And then pre-site development costs would include abating and removing the north school. So those costs, obviously would have to be incurred by this project, demo of the school, abating of the school, and finally it's all surrounded by, it's a residential neighborhood. Looking at the other site, Glenwood's Way. So again, some of the pros, it's centrally located within the town, and it's located obviously by other municipal facilities, town hall, the high school, middle school. There's adequate, it's along the major arteries, Route 18. So it's as the response time study, indicates in a report that this is a good location, centrally located. So it gets, everywhere throughout the perimeter of Abington, in an adequate response time. It's a much larger site, so there's plenty of additional land for any potential future expansions or training areas or parking, or it's not confined by the property lines. And then there are some pre-development costs, or would be low, just because it's a virgin lot, it's forest. We did actually do some preliminary walks yesterday with our geotechnical engineer to start getting some additional analysis of the soils, not necessarily flagging wetlands or anything along those lines, but just starting to get the initial engineering reviewed feasibility study of the soils of the future location of a building. And then lastly, it's got easy access on and off the site, heading down Glenwood's Way. So some of the cons, the site development may have its challenges just because of where it's located. Groundwater table might appear to be higher than obviously the North School site. So that's a future con. And then lastly, it'll need to be purchased. That has to go through obviously council, and then obviously the next piece of it would be needing to be negotiating through the housing authority land to access this privately owned lot. So jumping ahead, so a site plan that we had reviewed at our last building committee. So this is the North School site. This is the first, this is the final floor plan, which also includes, I failed to mention before, so through the whole program and exercise, as the chief alluded to a little bit earlier, this also includes the health department, building department offices, which is kind of at this portion right here. So kind of combining those services into one location, and then that's the square footage of what's needed for those two departments. And then the rest of it is the fire department. So you have the fire department, pretty much admin services in here, back of house services, and then here's the apparatus bay. As you can see, it's a triangular piece of land, accessed by all three sides. So that's really not a back of house, backyard lot. Apparatus bay, apron on both Adams Street and Birch Street. And then this off of Plymouth Street here would be more of a kind of a public parking access. And then this would be a parking lot access for the building and health departments, and some overflow parking for other additional public parking for the department. Jumping to the Glenwood's Way site.
Can I question here on the North School? You could go back to that.
Sure.
You're showing a Birch Street exit and entrance?
Correct. Yep.
Is there any possible reason or any reasoning why Plymouth Street could not be used?
So we analyzed that before, and a big portion of it is the shape of the site and the way that the program works, and then this L-shaped type building, and the property width of that location, and needing this 60 feet of the apron on either side. It really got congested because we need to have the drive-through on both sides anyways. So the width of the site at this location and the way the plan would worked out, it made it difficult. Also, correct me if I'm wrong though, Chief, access on and off of Plymouth, you were, I want to say not against it, but you felt as though there were some additional concerns about accessing off of there and trying to get to more of the main arteries downtown from Plymouth first, rather than going off of Adams and Birch. Is that correct, Chief?
Yeah, one of our concerns as well is the Plymouth and Birch Street intersection. This site has some challenges. You know, each site, and we'll get into it, there's pros and cons to each one. The biggest concern with this one is really the limited size of the site, and really some fairly busy roadways there, as we all know as they are now. Yeah, there's the building fit. It would, initially, this may be an easier build to do, but long-term, we're kind of seeing some issues between traffic, limited growth, limited parking, even just trying to get off of the Plymouth Street side with some regular administrative parking, if you will. We know how the cars go through there. So we do have some concerns with this site, with the traffic. We were looking to see if we could flip this around several times. And then we get into the shape of the land, as Sean was talking about, kept giving us challenges why it kept reverting back to this one. Not that it couldn't be done, but there were some challenges.
And I can piggyback on that.
I'm just concerned with, off of Birch Street, you do have, I think it's probably about a 4 or 5 foot drop in elevation. So you have elevation changes on this particular area when you're driving out from it. It's not level like it is on, say, Adams Street or even Plymouth Street.
I don't think the elevation change is actually that great halfway through the lot there. Maybe farther down toward the ball field area, down by the intersection of Adams and Birch. That is a bit higher, but right where that is now is probably in line where the parking lot is behind the North School. And just from standing there, you can walk out. There's the ability to degrade that down. It wouldn't be that dramatic. Plus, as Sean said, we need to have a large enough distance for the apron, and that would be enough to kind of grade out. The reason to really go back and answer what Sean, what you were asking, Jim, is that Plymouth Street's a much busier street, and for us to pull out, one, we wouldn't have the clearance that we would have down on the Birch Street side coming off of Plymouth to respond out. It would make things a little difficult. We would have to control traffic a little more. And this site, as the chief said, there's some challenges with this site. But that was why they did try to rotate this building several times to try to make it work. But this is the best possible way to do this site.
Can I interject as well? Because living in this neighborhood, and if you were to take a left out of Birch and head to the stop sign at Plymouth Street, I feel like it would cause a lot of confusion and congestion with, let's say, an older person that was at that stop sign. They're not going to know what to do. They're going to go through the intersection and there's going to be a car coming their way. And they're going to get nervous, or the car may hit them. There's so many accidents right there. Never mind, over by my house and like the stop sign at Adams Street. But I go that way every day for work. I come home that way every day for work. So I see everything. I just had a friend that got in an accident there a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know. It's just dangerous to me. I agree that, not that I like this location at all, but if you were to go out, I would think that Plymouth Street might be easier for the sake of, just traffic congestion at that stop sign. And where, if you're coming from the opposite direction, like in front of the arts place, it's so hard to see that I've even almost got an accident there, with people trying to pull out and there's bushes, and it's really, I don't know, I just would about that area.
I just don't think the tower could make that swing.
It would be really tough. But also, it's documented in the study, that the exact page I don't have, but it does specifically say that this site, one of its major challenges would be to, there would have to be some traffic engineering and redesign that would have to be necessary to even do this. So if this site were to be chosen, it wouldn't just be construction on the site. It would be additional work and traffic flow problems that need to be done at every intersection all around this, and all the way down Adams Street heading toward Washington. Just because those are interesting intersections that would have to be tackled if this site was to be the priority site.
Old Colony Planning Council has done a traffic study, and I believe this area has been reviewed by them. So there's some information there that's available.
I think the traffic study that would have to be done would be a redesign study. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
It would have to be, it wouldn't just be like normal traffic study. It would have to be an emergency vehicle to make it so emergency vehicles would be able to access them more readily. Because if this were the priority location, we'd be going through these intersections daily as opposed more frequently now than we do now.
Can I ask a question with that? What would the cost potentially be? And would that be something that we would have to either go to the selectmen or the town meeting for to ask the permission from the residents, or does that just go through the selectmen?
for what, a study?
To get a study, yeah.
You have to talk to Bruce Hughes on the Planning Council to find out whether I can go directly to Old Colony.
The other thing to keep in mind with this site as well is, we're all envisioning, putting a fire station there as at all three of these intersections that we know now, 3 intersections meeting Adams and Birch, Birch and Plymouth in Adams, as you see in the triangle there. Right now, there's no traffic lights on any of these. If the town were to put a fire station there at some point, we would at that point be adding traffic control signals at least Plymouth and Birch, if not more of them, if nothing else, to stop regular traffic for the emergency vehicles temporarily, exactly like we have right now at Station 1 on Route 18. So again, we're looking at this, not considering that if this were to be there, we'd have to add traffic control signal lights at these intersections, which would slow or stop the traffic prior to us coming out anyway. So just as long as that's kept in mind. There are challenges here. I'm not trying to minimize that, but there are traffic issues that would have to be overcome, and it is in the study, as well as down at Adams and Washington Street, further down, because if you look at the traffic study here, they're estimating about 48% of all of our responses will be going through there. And we have to do some work at that intersection or put a traffic control light controlled by us or the fire apparatus as we get there to make sure that we can get there safely and quietly, to be honest with you, because we understand that. So.
Correct. So no matter what direction the town of Abington is looking to go, whatever site ends up being, there will be some additional engineering. So traffic engineering, traffic studies, soil studies, engineering. So I believe at this point, we're recommending, two alternate locations, some alternate plans with some alternate budgets. And no matter which direction, the recommendations go towards the selectmen as well as the town, no matter what, to get to the next levels of design, next levels of progressing the designs, there's extra levels of investigative work, traffic studies, geotechnical, there's just a few, but, just so, this is kind of where we're at this point. The costs of a traffic study at this time, whether this on this site or just on the other site or any site, those are things that we can look into. But obviously just from a timing standpoint of where we were at and where we were heading, that wasn't something it was considered, but it wasn't something that was in the schedule. Any other questions on this site?
Sure, as we go through, we're going to come up with a few more things that we're going to want to kind of bounce back and forth on. But if you want to, because this would be just a good overview, and then I'd like to get deep into a few other things, and we can discuss as we go.
Okay. So again, here, this plan hasn't really changed too much for the committee members that were part of our last meeting. But again, Glenowitz Way, high school, middle schools, town hall. So accessing, again, through the Housing Authority lot, which is this rectangular lot here, to this private lot. Off the traffic circle, coming down in, similar footprint, similar building. You have it's the same footprint, same building, some additional parking along this back portion of the lot here. You have the outbuilding, much larger aprons on both sides, for accessing on either direction. This, as you can see, it's a heavier, more wooded area, so it has more opportunity for growth. Large apron here for training exercises, and again, it's kind of, we'll call it secluded, but it's kind of out of its own way. So then accessing back down off of Lincoln and Glenwood's Way, back onto Route 18. So those, let me try to dig up the.
One thing for people to know that either never saw our previous meetings or came to, but the difference between these two sites, this lot here is over 6 acres, and the North School site is just over 2 acres. There's a considerable size difference between them. That's why you're able to get so much more apron space, much more parking, and as Sean just said, there's more room for growth.
Right. So as Derek just mentioned, so the site size here, 6.4 acres. So looking at there's the wooded marsh area here and the wooded marsh area in this location, from the local or state GIS. So the traffic entering in the site would be kind of splitting between the two wetlands, and then putting our building in this back corner, as you just looked at. And the North School site, 2.6 acres. So it's roughly 3.5 acres larger. Understandably, some of it is a wetlands in this area, but again, it's easier to fit the program that's required for a new station on the site.
And there would be some other challenges to this site as well, but as far as the wetlands go, the study did note that there was no FEMA or environmental restrictions. There would still have to be some additional conservation and flagging that would have to be checked out, but that was noted inside the study as well.
Correct.
When I was reading,
Question on the entrance. Would that have to be accessible or considered a public way or private way?
If I can, Derek, I'll jump in on this.
Yep.
Jim, you're absolutely correct. One of the challenges with this site, the site's a great site where it is. And once we're on Route 18, from that portion, it's almost the geographic center of town. And we get into the propagation studies and the response time studies, that really afforded us the best response times to most places in town. The challenge, however, is getting from that building to Route 18. Now, we all know how Glenwood's Way is several times a day when school's getting out, once we open schools again, when sports events are out, we know it clogs up. So a couple ways around that. The best way for this would be to put a separate emergency vehicle only road directly either parallel along Glenwood's Way or go in behind, in between Lowe's and probably behind the senior center, the senior housing there, one way or the other. That's a little bit a longer plan. The shorter plan, we feel we could probably control Glenwood's Way with traffic signaling. Once we know we're going somewhere, we could immediately stop the traffic on Route 18, dump out Glenwood's Way to clear the path for us so we could respond. So the short term, there are some signaling solutions, I believe, that to be able to overcome that. When you look at the response time study on this, we were pretty amazed to see from this location, pretty much right at Glenwood's Way in Bedford Street at Route 18, this was one of the best response times in town. It's directly in between our two current stations as it is now. The challenges with this site, the short-term challenges of building it because it's virgin land and there's more site work, obviously, just like when they built Town Hall and Library, that was all very similar, but now that once it's done, it's great. And the other challenge is really just getting that response access road to there. Once that's done, this site, I think, gives us much more flexibility long-term for the future of Abington for any growth, or there's much less parking hindrances and space hindrances with this. as well as it's really bringing the fire department back into kind of the core of Abington where everything's happening up here. Where right now we're kind of set aside. The North School site, again, if that was chosen, if the town did any of this, it's kind of set aside. We're somewhat divorced from the rest of the town, not really easy to get to. This kind of brings us back into the fold, if you will. So long term, there's a lot more, I think, pros with this. The short term, just getting it done, there's a few more challenges than the other site would be. The North School site's the complete opposite. It may be easy to build that initially, but long term, moving forward, we're really marginalized with the traffic around us. So we're literally on an island.
Chief, when I was reviewing the feasibility study, it made mention of a Providence Road. I have no idea what that is.
I think that was a typo from another study with that narrative. We caught that as well, in that I noticed that myself.
Sorry,
That kind of made it through the final
I-
document. I think
yeah.
that was just an error. We don't have a Providence Road.
No,
Okay.
that's
I
my
don't get
fault.
out much, so I thought maybe.
No. That's my fault. I thought. Okay, sorry. I'll fix that again. I thought I did.
I'm actually very impressed that you found that. You're very
Yeah.
thorough reading this, and I appreciate that.
I have no life.
No, that must. I did a copy paste from some. That's my fault. I'll fix that.
No need to explain copy and paste to me.
This whole process as well, this obviously started back in really in August, September of last year. It really got going September and October. And when we're really in the middle of putting this entire study together, obviously the virus hit. And I applaud KBA for working through all of this. This affected their offices and their production as well. They were forced to work from home. And so we were throwing a lot of challenges as this thing was really coming together as we're all going through with this coronavirus. So I'm happy with the result of this, and we were able to get this done despite all of the limitations that we're all having.
So I just voice a couple of concerns, kind of major really, is one, I'm assuming that someone within the town government has reached out and we know for certain that the landowner is willing to sell the property at a reasonable price to the town. Has anybody had any unofficial conversation or any way that we can lean on that or have confidence that that can happen?
Yeah, there's been discussions with the landowner, and he is willing to sell the property. That was one of the first things that kind of needed to be addressed right off the bat. Once we knew that was available, the next challenge was to see how we can get across the housing authority lot. And there was some research done on that, and ultimately we do have the right of way and permission to be able to do, not an easement, but there's a way to do an access point to get from one side to the other.
That's good. The other is, I heard mention of geotech was on the land today. Probably don't really know what we're getting ourselves into until we've had more investigation on that. So that concerns me. And then the chief has already addressed the fact that it could be the most ideal site, but if we don't have unobstructed access to Route 18, it may be a beautiful site, but it is of no value. I mean, we cannot have a delay in response time because senior's last day or any day in the high school life. So that would be a major hurdle in my mind. We must be able to assure ourselves that we can get in and out of there at a phone call. So I don't know what your thought is. I mean, I know that access road is tight to be able to develop a dedicated lane off of Lincoln Boulevard, Glenowitz Way. It's going to be a bit of a challenge. From what I know, which is very little, I think it would be better off if we can somehow or another come up with an access road around Lowe's and through the bowling alley or the rental place. I don't know how the design team is feeling about proceeding on that.
Can I just say one thing too, is I pick up obviously from the middle school, so I see the traffic and it does start early, like at the Rotary on Glenowitz pretty much, and goes all the way down to the set of lights. But I really like the idea, because this hasn't been brought up before by Chief Nuttall, is that they can stop the traffic. I don't know if that would be a light signal or something at the Rotary, and then let all of those people go as soon as you get the call. You know what I mean? I'm sure, I don't know how that all works, but I'm sure that there would be a light signal, and then the people that are waiting to get onto Route 18 would just be able to go quickly. And really, everybody's trying to get out of there and they want to get out as soon as possible. And there's not usually any leftover traffic. So I actually think it would work. I mean, but I just think that it would probably work by the time you guys got in your fire trucks and got to, the Glenowitz Way intersection of where you're going to be, and with people stopping, and I think everybody will get out of that area pretty quick.
I think you're both right. Actually, I think, Roger, you're 100% correct. Wendy's correct as well. The short-term answer to this would be what Wendy just said, and we mentioned earlier. I think we could temporarily solve it with traffic. The long-term and the realistic goal on this would have to be what Roger said. We really would need an emergency access road directly from here to Route 18. Whichever path we could take. And we looked at a few, but at this stage, it's a feasibility stage without really getting deep into involving lawyers. We're talking to landowners and like that. That's, we didn't go that deep into it, but realistically, that would be the appropriate long-term goal to really solve it. And then it's done.
I know that I had some involvement during the design development of the high school. And one of the things that we looked at length was to develop a dedicated access for emergency vehicles, because not only the high school, but the library and the town hall. And we never really came up with anything other than we made the roadway as large as it could be so that people could pull over and allow emergency vehicles to pass. We did look at going out behind the town hall as an emergency vehicle exit only. I think it was on top of a sewer line that was installed. I don't know, but that's not going to really work for a full-time fire department. So, but every challenge is hopefully has a solution. But I think that's something, if in the end the committee is leaning towards going in that direction, and there's so many positives, I think we should be. We need to be able to solve that, because I'd be hard-pressed to recommend this site if we haven't solved that part of the puzzle.
And obviously, we looked at as well, Thayer Street is right there. And we're very close to Thayer Street. And in the response time studies, he actually factored in using Thayer Street. We would prefer a straight line right to 18, but it's a very short link to Thayer Street. However, there are buildings there and we don't own that land. We have to deal with the condominium association to go between basically that building. I think it's building 9, Thayer and Lowe's, in between there.
Building 1 and Lowe's right here.
Building 1, I'm sorry. So, I think there's a few different options we could look at.
That would be wonderful. I can't pull the page up right here, but I thought that I had seen some
Retention ponds behind Lowe's.
Retention ponds or something along those areas.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something we can do with that. Anything is worthy of investigation, because there you go. I was looking for that. So you can see where that red is a drainage easement. So that's obviously going to have a bit of an obstacle, but I don't know what to say. It probably could be worked out.
Well, again, these are issues that we'd love to be able to solve right away. But the initial way to, as the chief and Wendy had brought up, is being able to at least, Glenowitz Way is only so wide. And there could be some short-term ways of making it a little wider or making it able for us to get through. But putting a light there definitely can make it so we can clear a path no matter what, to get out. As far as a secondary egress point, there's a couple options. I just don't know. They weren't really part of the feasibility study, and it's not something that I don't know if it's something that we can include in or something that we need to wait until down the line to figure out.
You know, one other little thing to think about is that is actually, I guess it's supposed to be just one lane, but everybody's made it into 2 lanes. So, so that, you know, people that are either going straight or right or left can do that quicker. But if you took that, actually put lanes in and did one of the lanes that were on the right towards you guys, like a do not drive on lane, so that it would just be yours, and then everybody would, you know, have just that one lane to go down, and then maybe until you get a little further down past the housing authority, then you can open it. So you can't drive in your lane, right, on the right hand side, but then maybe it could be opened a little bit towards the end, and then there could be like 3 lanes at the end towards Route 18. I don't know if any of that makes sense to you guys, a map or something, but just, I don't know, it's really not supposed to be 2 lanes, but people make it 2 lanes. So that's all I'm saying, is that maybe you guys could even do like a do not drive, fire station only type of lane right there. Just something to think about later.
One of the other things for Glenowitz Way site you have to keep in mind is your stormwater management program. I mean, we keep on talking about a 5 or 6 acre parcel, but by the time you look at what's being paved and covered over, you're talking about 2.5, 3 acres of property that's going to be, you know, impervious. So you're going to have to find some program to manage the stormwater up there, and I don't think there's going to be that much area to do that. You got a high water table up in there. Most of the water that is contained in Lowe's flows off to the east of the senior housing. It's almost like a big retention pond for both projects.
Right.
But when you look at the amount, you got parking area and you got the building and you get the roadway out to Glenowitz Way, that's all going to be shedding water that you're going to have to manage somehow. You're not going to be able to just dump it off into the, you know, existing drainage lines out there. I think somewhere up there it splits off. It either goes, one portion goes to the east and the other goes to the west towards Town Hall.
I don't know anything about water drainage, but could we just make a ditch? Like
Well, I think all those properties that are back behind, that are that would be to the west of the site, the areas that are behind Town Hall, I don't know who owns or what's back there as far as water shedding goes.
And these over here.
I mean, everything that's, I'm pointing to the screen, you guys can't see me pointing at it. But
The red spot right there,
just south of that,
Town Hall.
yeah, so just south of that, all that area would be to the west of this proposed site. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of area there to shed things.
If we have a retention pond, it's a good excuse to train in drafting.
That's true.
So,
Yeah.
so that comes down to, that's the owner of this lot here, obviously, which is the senior center, whoever that is, and this. I'm assuming this would be town land or housing land here, you know. But again, yeah, you're correct. I mean, those are all considerations that need to be taken, you know. So the stormwater management obviously is, you know, that's on every project, you know. So, you know, those are usually taken into consideration, obviously, once you get into much more into design, you know. So there's more opportunity of it here, you know. Obviously our school site, it's all existing, you know. It's pretty much already a paved lot to begin with, so, you know, there's not much of it there, just kind of revitalizing what's already there. But yes, so that's other options. So that's when we get into the budgeting of these sites, you'll kind of start seeing why some of the costs on this site are a little bit more, and that is included, you know, and allowances and budgets for additional site development costs, you know, stormwater management, you know, wetland delineation, you know, utilities. I mean, everything. So that's all considered, you know, with a budget allowance. but that's obviously a valid point.
So, is there anything else on this particular side that we want to discuss? Because we could go back to the pros and cons and actually go through and start discussing the things that are actually on there in depth before we get to the actual budget section. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about here? No? Sean, if you could bring up the pros and cons, we can kind of just go through that again, because we just listed them quickly, but we can actually talk about them.
Yeah.
So when we look at the pros and cons from the study, the North School is the traffic study was favorable for this lot because it has major access already set to that area of town. It's not centrally located, but it does have access to the major arteries, and it is owned. But like the chief had said earlier, it is just an island, and that kind of brings a lot of the cons into it. This is why there's more cons on this side, I suspect, because whatever we decide to do there, if the town does decide to use this lot, you're stuck with what you have for land. There's no room for expansion at all. But the building was the way that this building study was proposed. All the actual space needs for all the rooms and the way the layout of the building was designed, that was to get the square footage, which was roughly around 40,000 square feet, I believe, Sean, just below. And that's designed for a building that's prepared to be there for a long time. It's got room to grow for the building, but as far as space outside the building, where we do a lot of fire training, where we do hose testing, we do aerial operations. There's a lot of things that we do outside with our vehicles, and that lot was pretty tight. The benefits were that it'd be the lot is pretty much ready to go. It just needs to have the demolition of the building that's there now, and then everything kind of retrofitted to fit a new building. That's kind of what all the pros are, and then the cons are the future growth. When you look at the Glenowitz Way site, I feel like it's opposite. Things would take a little longer to get things going from the go. There'd be a little bit more work up front, but it would provide a long-term fix for the town going forward. There wouldn't be any restrictions going forward with that site. But there are the site development issues, the groundwater issues, and egress issues that we'd have to look at.
Well, the restrictions on Glenowitz Way that you might want to consider is the amount of wetlands that you have and how much wetlands you can alter. If you alter the wetlands, you have to find an area to replicate it. You're never going to get rid of it, so just keep that in mind.
So the site, the study did show that back bottom corner of that lot didn't have any restrictions, where everything is to the current maps that KBA was able to find and put into the study. So that back area where you build the building itself, and then the amount of area that you had to have those large aprons and area to move around, except for that, which would be the northwest corner of that picture, the wooded marsh. That would be the area that I don't think that we wouldn't be allowed to do anything with. But the bottom area would.
Yep, correct. So as you could, where we brought in a road, we're splitting the difference right here between the two wooded marsh areas and constructing the building in this kind of L-shaped portion to lower portion. So, your stormwater management, we're not touching any of these two areas, but we're able to, manage some of it over here, manage some of it over here. Jumping over to this, you can overlay these two maps, but really, again, so this upper corner untouched, so stormwater management over here, and then probably in this area, and then potentially tying into Lowe's already.
Can we go back to that previous illustration that you had? I'm just wondering, what is the white dotted line? Is that a 100-foot setback, or what is that?
This is the setback off of these guys.
Okay,
So we're putting everything in this corner.
right.
The
So
roadway, yes. would
it's
have-
a 100-foot setback, so we can clearly go in this area, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Considered what they call a buffer zone from the wetlands.
right,
It's a
right.
100-foot buffer.
Because Jim, to be honest with you, I absolutely share your concern about the wetlands, and if we had to replicate wetlands, sure, we can do it, but we got to pay for that. And
Yeah, it's costly.
it's very costly.
But one of the biggest concern I would have would be the stormwater management for the overall project.
Yeah.
And everyone knows that the water table in that particular area is very shallow.
Mhm.
So whatever type of system you put in has to accommodate that.
I believe that Sean mentioned earlier that that they did factor a lot of that into some of the allowances for the site work. If you looked at the cost analysis between the two, I think the site work was a little bit more for this because of the extra work it would take. But
Correct. I mean, again, they're all allowances. They're all, budgetary estimates. But, this, I can dig into the exact costs, but I believe we're about $1 million more on this site. So Glenwood's Way site development allowance, we're at 3 million. Yeah, so $1.5 million. And then we did a site work allowance at North School site, $1.5 million. So we had about $1.5 million more on site development costs. Number one of it being obviously undeveloped, and bringing in infrastructure. And then the other piece of it would be, management, stormwater, and, additional wetlands, all of those items that would need to be considered once we, proceed with design.
So my concern, not a concern, it seems strange that the delta is so small between North and Glenwood's Way, and that site development cost of $3 million probably does not take in budget for any potential future roadway. Would that be a correct assumption?
That yes, I think because that's kind of that more of that long-term solution. Obviously that if it's an additional roadway that's cut through other lots and wetlands and
So we really haven't. Do we have an allowance for potentially doing that work or no? Or is that yet to be determined?
so there's no allowance
Not the
for
budget for what what you don't know.
correct. So we don't.
Like a contingency dollar value and.
Yeah, we've got a lot of contingencies built into that, but there's not a specific line item for a new access road, whether it's parallel to Lincoln Boulevard, running out to 18, or running through here, going out to 18, or a road coming off to there. I mean, we've budgeted enough to carry what we're doing on this lot, that we feel comfortable with. But obviously, any additional roadways and that's as you know that's a separate project within itself. But we do have fairly healthy contingencies built in. Just at this point, we're at
I don't see it. I thought reading 5% contingency.
so we got a 15% contingency just on the design.
Okay.
So
On the design.
correct. So built in, this, not to get into too much right now, but the $3 million site development costs or site work allowance, design contingency built into that. So it's roughly $3 million additional design contingency with those slight escalations of construction, or bid of next fall, which that's escalated out 5.5%, 5.25%. So that's built into there. Obviously, we can't determine how the account is going to be. Obviously, that's going to be a complete wild card.
You mean
the difference
take a
between this
professional
one
guess.
and the North School site, the two allowances, although those differences are 1.5 million in differences for site allowance, what this one shows is that that's a full $3 million allowance. The other one shows a 1.5, but doesn't show that you have to also subtract The 1.25 it would take to tear down the building and do the hazardous waste.
Right. That's a real expense.
That's a huge expense.
When I look at the owner's construction contingency at 5%, I mean, they're all just numbers at this point.
I think it was just about
5%,
a little bit higher up, I think.
a little on the light
Oh, I'm sorry.
side when we have so much unknown. But I guess I'm not sure what. I'm just going to let you continue with the presentation. I got to absorb this some more.
If I could jump in just for a moment too, because now we're getting into the numbers, and I just want to talk to everybody on the committee as well as the residents, which we are all residents, because we're seeing some very large numbers, and quite frankly, there was a sticker shock when we first saw these as well. You know, KBA explained how they got to the numbers. We agree with the numbers with how they got to them. However, we're not blind as to the economy that we seem to be slipping into at the moment, and we don't want to make the residents think that we're not. Certainly, there's needs for the fire department. You know, the document's heavy. It really comes down to these pages. What would a recommended cost be? And we're looking at very large numbers. This is not monopoly money. This would be our money, and I fully understand that. So, and again, to the residents, we're not quite sure where this is going to go. Ultimately, you'd have the votes, assuming what this committee decides to recommend to the Board of Selectmen, and then see where it would go from there. We're sort of, and we had a lot of discussions internally on this. Number one, we have to finish this feasibility study, and this is part of the feasibility study. This is the money spent to get to this portion, and this is part of finishing that off, the final product. The other thing is, it probably is only going to go up. The longer we wait on this, because our concerns and needs and challenges in the existing stations that we have are not going to go away. At some point, they're going to have to be addressed. So we're at the question of, do we not present this because of the economy that's going on? Or if that was the case, the residents, you know, several years from now, we want to say, well, now that it even costs more at that point, why didn't you tell us what it was then? That's kind of the challenge that we're in right now. And we're not blind to that. We're looking at large numbers. We understand it. We understand the economy that we're in now versus when this entire project began, when the economy was doing really well. So that being said, I just wanted to preface this next portion as it's coming to the residents and the taxpayers in Abington. We're not blind to this. At some point, we need to do something about this. The numbers are only going to increase. So when we're looking at these large numbers, and you're going to see a menu of options on these, but realistically, we're all in the same ballpark, one way or another, depending on which site may or may not be used, or if we include different town departments, the building, the Board of Health that we work close, or if we don't include them to save money. We're fairly close either way. So if you want to start getting into the numbers now, Derek or Sean, I just wanted to preface it with that.
Yeah, that initial page, if you want to, I think it's either 155 or 156. It's a couple before these. That kind of just show the actual cost estimates. I think it's the next one, because this is just the construction estimate. This is the total project costs. As the chief said, like, this is kind of like the menu of what's going on. There's two different sites that the committee came to agreement with in our last meeting, and then it came down to, well, we did a floor plan space needs program with the architect at the very beginning of the feasibility study, and he designed rooms based off of everything that we do currently out of the Abington Fire Department and what the needs are for the department. So that was room by room by room, which came up to a general square footage. You can see it there. It's roughly around 40,000 square feet. The differences in those are if we took off a couple of the departments that we had added in there. Initially, we were trying to fit the health department and the building department into the building to try to help free up some space at the town hall building. They kind of, the two departments, they kind of work hand in hand with the fire department as far as fire prevention goes, and then health department, because we run EMS, emergency medical services, out of the fire station. It kind of seemed like a good fit, but that would make the building a little bit larger and cost a little bit more. The other options kind of either remove those especially if it was toward the Glenwood site. Those two departments would be kind of next door at the town hall, and it would save a little bit of money. And then the last plan is just a consolidated, tighter plan, trying to remove, I don't remember the term for some of the hallway space, but there was a way to kind of consolidate some of that hallway space to trim off some of the overall square footage. That's the differences between these, and then those sheets that we already looked at where it showed the different allowances. That's the breakdown of where these numbers came from. When we saw this, just like the chief said, I mean, it is kind of sticker shock. It is big numbers, and we definitely understand that. But we started this process before everything happened in the world, and we owed it as a committee to kind of get the study finished and have these conversations. Now we have to come up with our decision on what we can do. These numbers, though, Sean can break down, and KVA has done a good job of kind of explaining to us in previous meetings that this is not different from any place else. Newer fire stations for generalized buildings cost this. I mean, people that were involved in the school know how much the school costs. Newer buildings that are very large they're expensive buildings. And also, like the chief had mentioned, and we've heard this from KBA, the cost of these buildings aren't getting cheaper. Over the years, they've progressively gotten more and more expensive over time. So this is what we're looking at right now. And all of us are residents. I'd hate to see something happen in 5 or 10 years where things are even more expensive. And Sean, if you want to kind of go through the breakdown of these and a little bit for the rest of us.
Sure. Yeah. No. So I think they're all identical the way it was broken down, but here this first one is we're looking at the Glenwood Way site. It's a probable cost, opinion of probable cost, and it also includes the fire department, the building department, and health departments. I'll just kind of go through line by line just so everyone can understand. But this one obviously doesn't include North School hazardous material waste and demo. So that's kind of in the positive right away. So these are the initial square footages of what this is kind of our maxed out square footage of the new building, the smaller outbuildings. So those have 2 different square foot costs. Really what it comes down to. So that's our generalized budget estimate for those 2 buildings. And then the site allowance, which we just discussed a few moments ago. So overall square footage of construction, roughly 45,000 square feet. So with that, we always build in contingencies, from a design aspect. So at this stage, we're usually right around 15% or so. So again, there's another $3 million design contingency. Escalation, again, this is obviously, on today's standard, even before we were what we're dealing with right now, but starting into next fall of 2021, this is an escalation cost and more you may see things. So then you get a direct construction cost budget estimate of roughly $23.7 million. And then we talk about looking at general contractor markups. So these are typical for all different construction types, construction projects, specifically in Massachusetts for public bidding. But you have your general conditions and general requirements. So that's kind of the initial overhead and profit for the contractor. And that roughly goes between 8.5% to 10%, depending on the economy. Insurances, that's normal. Bonding, that's normal. Building permitting, since this is a specific town project, in most scenarios these are waived by the town. But so that's a 0% analysis there. Builder's risk insurance, that's not included, but that's something that typically the town can purchase on the side of the projects. Then you have a general contractor's fee of roughly 3%. So, after you get your construction budget, you hire your contractor, so your bids would be coming in roughly around 28 million plus or minus for construction costs. Then we break it down into equipment costs. So these are kind of, we always call them soft costs, stuff that the owner is going to incur after the fact, while the construction's happening. So there's audio-visual equipment that's going to be included. So this is, networking and cameras and TV screens and monitors and stuff like that. Then you have furnishings and fixtures. So you got your desks, your chairs, your conference tables, and that's all, additional costs. And this is all mathematical. We take it a square foot cost built to the size of the building. So that's always gets adjusted as we progress. Loose equipment, this is just some additional equipment that, some of the departments may or may not need at that time. So we always like to have some allowance at that point. IT equipment, new network equipment, new switches, new computers, new telephone system. Again, this is new equipment that usually would need to be considered. Obviously, by relocating the department to a new site, there'll be new communications equipment. So you have new equipment, you have a new tower. So there's allowances built into that. And this is all from our historical knowledge from recent buildings, recent towers, recent equipment in and around this area in Massachusetts, basically. Communication consoles for dispatch, security and access control allowances. So this initial soft cost of equipment, roughly $2.5 million, with additional contingencies built into that for 5%. So, 2.7 on that piece. Then the last item, for project costs, again, some additional soft costs and owner's indirect costs. So obviously basic architectural engineering services and fees. Again, this is a mathematical, this is built into, typically construction costs. This can change obviously with everything, with specific engineers and architects, but that's a healthy allowance. Projects of this scale in Massachusetts, you'll need a project manager, an OPM. So that's typically built on percentage as well. So that's OPM costs. Some of these last items are just subtle, but once we have greater discussions with town manager and the town, some of these reimbursable costs and add additional services, allowances, utility back charges, moving costs, those are all some real subtle allowances, reproductions, legal and advertising, material testing. This is again depending on how much is done throughout the design and engineering. This is all kind of throughout construction process. And then an allowance for land acquisition costs. So this was built into the current tax valuation of, I think it was 2019, I believe it was. So this is the tax cost of that lot of the private owner. So again, tallying all that up, 2.6 million. Then a subtle owner contingency on that, brings us to 2.8. So tallying all those up brings you a project total cost of 33.8 million. So that's just a really kind of quick breakdown of how we break all these through, and going back into the construction costs of each of the buildings. We did have an outside estimator go through and take a feasibility estimate, Maya Coda Consulting. So she went through, basically did a feasibility estimate, and then we compared our square foot cost built into that. So that's where we derived those numbers. So really, not getting into every single estimate, but that's the quick summary of those. And then just with this one going back to North School, all the indirect costs and soft costs are equal. All the markups for general contractor markups are equal, but obviously it's a mathematical equation built into the general construction costs, so that is slightly less. And then specifically for the North School site, obviously we talk about the hazardous materials removal and then the site demo. But again, the square footages are the same, contingencies are the same, and that just builds in, and that comes into the allowance of the site work, and then again it gets us to 33, just over 33 million.
Question.
Yep.
As we're talking about the North School and the removal of contaminated materials, now it's one thing to point out that no matter which way we go, the fire department does not have access to any grant programs, unlike the school who had received grants. But when it comes to removal of hazardous waste, such as a school and stuff like that, are there any state and federal programs that might assist the town in removal?
I think it depends on, because right now the town owns it. obviously the town's a school. I think it depends on what the town's looking to do with it. If the town is looking to renovate it into a school, there potentially could be some out there. I'm not that familiar with them. But if it's going to be sold as is, or that's something different, and then the new owner would incur those costs. I know that's not really a good answer, but I think it all depends on how it currently is going to be used and by whom.
Yeah, Sean, I'd have to agree with that. I think if these were active schools, and I'm not aware of grants, but I think in general, if these were active schools or any other type of municipal building where there was going to be an estimated continued use of that building, you're going to have a far better likelihood of trying to find some kind of a grant to mitigate these issues. Really, this is as part of tearing down the building. First, you have to mitigate and remove the asbestos. And really, that's the hazardous material in the North School is just this asbestos built into the building. It's not hanging loose or anything. It's not a general danger to anybody going in there until you start tearing the building down and getting into the ground soil and the sub-basement under it. At that point, you'd be touching it. It has to be removed. So I don't believe that there's really a grant for that, to be honest with you.
Right.
The other thing not really mentioned on these as well, and I know the question is going to come up, would be, assuming this were to move forward, the ultimate declaration of surplus and resale of the two existing fire stations now. We really didn't get into, whatever that dollar figure is, it's not going to offset the bottom line on here. It would somewhat, but certainly not that entire bottom line. There's no question of that. However, there would be some offset with that, as well as if they were sold as taxable properties in the future. I believe that whatever that dollar figure is, would be minuscule compared to the cost on this, but it does factor into it at some point.
I would believe that any surplus, and Wendy would know more about this because I know she's involved in surplus property, but I think it would all go back to the general fund, and then it would be up to the selectmen or possibly even a town vote to appropriate the money to go into this project or whatever way the town wanted to go. But that wouldn't be necessarily tied in, but it certainly would be a funding mechanism that should be considered by the town and the selectmen moving forward. So it's good to put out there.
It's actually highlighted here in the study as well. There is no dollar figure with it.
Right.
It did say that it would produce, it could produce surplus properties that would help reduce the overall project cost. But it specifically says that they have not been factored or included because nobody would know what it would be worth.
Right. And as Roger said, it will come down to the town on where those funds go.
Yeah.
But again, obviously there is some funding that would come from that. And then if it, but again, this is, in a way, this is kind of your worst case scenario built into, the knowns that we have. Obviously, there's still some unknowns, many unknowns, but built into what we have currently is where we are. So with that, again, this was a similar budget estimate built into those three scenarios. So as Derek alluded to earlier, this is the first scenario where we have the two sites, the full fire department, the full building, the health departments built into the square footage. So that's kind of your worst case scenario, maximize your square footage, working through that. The next round of estimates has some additional efficiencies built into it, kind of consolidating some of the community spaces, reducing some of the square footage a little bit, and just trying to help reduce those costs a little bit more. And then lastly, the very final one is just the fire department only, so that eliminates health, building department, and then continues with those building efficiencies. So with that said, I know you guys saw these the building committee last time, these floor plans. So just really quickly, looking at it, so the building and the health department, as we looked at on the site plans, is really this right wing, if you will. with a combined lobby. Gets one lobby into main lobby into the corridor for building and health, and then another lobby reception area for the fire. So here is, chief admin, conference areas, shared conference room, dispatch area, ready room area, some shared offices and secured storage down here, a wellness center. Wellness center here. This is a kitchen and break area here. Locker rooms, decon, showers, all right off of the apparatus bay, which is total of, this one actually has a total of 5 bays. As we progress a little bit more, the building efficiencies, we got rid of this last outside storage bay, if you will, and turned it into a 6th apparatus bay and brought all that program into here. So that was kind of the last piece. I brought the vehicles and equipment into this last bay. Sorry, I'm jumping around. Back up on the 2nd floor. So again, here is the roof of the building and health departments. The main stair coming up to a upper lobby for the meeting and training area, EOC training room, and that's with some public restrooms and some storage, and then this back hallway just for additional egress, and then this upper bunk area is private and secluded from the public area, but it's 10 bunk rooms around the perimeter with 2 captain bunk rooms on either side. Small break area, restrooms, showers, laundry, and then main building facilities, storage, mechanical rooms, electrical room up in here. But I did mention too, so this is a mezzanine on the apparatus bays for training. So this is the training bay. So this has your, Derek can explain it a lot better than I could, but basically, all the training, the hose drying, ladder. We're missing a couple items up here, but basically interior training area within the apparatus bay. The next floor plan with a little bit more efficiencies. It's very subtle, but again, what I was talking about with this up here with the 6th apparatus bay and kind of consolidating these storage rooms on the outside. So a little bit narrower apparatus bay, so a little square footage reduction there. Got rid of a few hallways in and around here, consolidating a couple spaces, but it's very subtle, but it still keeps the entire program within the floor plans. And then upstairs, again, pretty much similar, just reduced. Still have the same amount of bunks, just kind of consolidated them into around the perimeter. Again, very subtle, but an opportunity to kind of reduce some of the square footage. Then lastly, as we've been discussing, that last is the removal of, not removal, but omitting the program of the health and building departments. Again, a main lobby vestibule area for the stair to go up to the meeting and training areas. A separate lobby, kind of duplicated spaces, but a separate lobby and reception area to get into the admin portion of the fire department. Again, all the same program around here, just kind of reconfigured it slightly. Still have the 6 apparatus bays with the storage and vendor storage on the outside here. And then lastly, going upstairs, very similar to the last. Not much has changed, but again, just kind of consolidating the bunks with the captain's bunks in the corner here. I know that was pretty quick, but from that, we took the building massing. Obviously, there's many different approaches, but this is the view, from the main entrance. This is the stair tower. This would be the building and health departments. Here you have kind of the back of house admin areas, the bunk rooms. This is the fitness wellness center, break room area along this side. And finally going to that kind of corner wrap in the building. So again, this is kind of the wellness area, the locker rooms, the dirty rooms, break areas in this corner, the admin and bunk rooms, and then the apparatus bays. And then lastly, this back corner again, here is the building and health departments, the training room, meeting room area here, and then this bunk area over, bunk rooms areas over here, dispatch, admin offices along here onto the apparatus, into the apron, and then you have your apparatus bays here. So I know it's, it's the combination of cedar shakes, clapboard siding, metal panels, obviously there's many different options, stone, brick, kind of keep it in the vernacular of Abington, in this region of Mass. But all this from the budget estimation came into consideration, and that's where we came up with our square foot cost on similar building types in our recent projects. It all is in line. So again, obviously this is just one pass. This is an idea. There'll be many, many, many other iterations, but this is where we completed our study with imagery as well as the floor plans. And that's pretty much it.
Oh, that kind of shows out the whole the layouts of the different styles. That's all the stuff that the architect took room by room and designed it to come up with the square footage for what the building would need to be.
Correct. Exactly. So as Derek mentioned, so we had our third-party consultant that we've worked with for the last 25 years for fire department programming. So we spent many hours in the beginning of this project going through Zoom meetings just like this, so we took piece by piece. This was an apparatus bay, and we talked about each vehicle, each type of vehicle, the size, the clearances, and walk through how it was necessary. So we, I don't need to go through every single one of these, but really dove into each. This is the training mezzanine tower area. So you get the training stair tower, where the compressor goes, where the extraction training hatch is, stuff like that. This is a firematic storage. I mean, again, they just room by room by room, methodically went through each space and, where the turnout gear goes, how the laundry works, how decon works. Kind of got the sign off with the department on each of these spaces. And as we went through each of these rooms, we then took it, and put it into our initial floor plan. Here's a general layout for building departments and the health department. So again, there's many, many little floor plans that go through all these spaces on what would be the best scenario for each of these rooms, and that's how we derived with our general floor plan layouts.
Sean, if I can just jump in too, just to put into context for everybody, this is very similar to most of the fire stations that we visited when we, back in the fall and the winter, we visited about, I think it was 10 or 11 fire stations, fairly recently built within the last 10, mostly within the last 5 years, both in Plymouth and Norfolk counties. And this really is the standard design that most towns are doing at this point. This isn't something we just created. Let's make a big fire station for Abington just out of thin air. This is really kind of how most fire stations are being built right now. Very similar in size, very comparable to a lot of the towns that we saw. In fact, I think the scene on the front cover of this, I think that's the Randolph substation, the new one that they built on North Main Street in Randolph about 2 or 3 years ago. I believe that's Randolph, but I could be wrong. We saw a number of fire stations. It could be Plainville as well, but this is really what everybody's building, and it's based on the science of what is needed for the appropriate size around the fire apparatus, the appropriate separation of the hot and the cold zones, which is the hot zones are where the diesel exhaust is, where the contaminants, the biohazards are from the ambulance, especially now. Everybody's very familiar with decontamination. You can imagine what we're going through now, as well as the issues that we're having currently of social distancing in our fire station. These newer stations that they build, they're not having as many problems. We're overcoming some very significant challenges with what we have now. So when we put our plan together for the station, it was really based on the science behind how modern fire stations in New England, in this area, are being built.
And some of those other factors, like the chief just said, that you brought up, that are things that we don't have. The hot to cold corridor. There's a decon area there to get from the area of combustion and any other contaminants that we could have going into the main part of the building. That's one of the biggest safety issues that we do have now. That every new building that's being designed, at least over the course of the past 5 to 10 years, this is a mandatory part that has to be put in there. And Sean, you could probably go in a little bit more with that, but there's definitely, this is something that every new building is being designed with to keep everybody safe.
Yes, exactly. I mean, like, getting keeping the dirty and clean clean areas separate, so as you're coming off of the trucks, you're coming in, you're decontaminating here, you're washing all your equipment in this station, and you're going straight to your turnout locker rooms and your showers. And before you get out of there, you're coming into your clean areas, in the clean part of the building. So, this is all secluded and keeping it completely separate from, obviously all the additional admin and again, clean areas of the department. And as you can obviously understand, what they're dealing with now is everyone's on top of each other currently in those two stations. So there is no separate areas of clean and dirty areas.
I do want to jump in really quick. I just want to say it's 6:05 right now. We do have to end the meeting by 6:30. There are other committee meetings coming up right afterwards. So I know many of us in the committee are pretty familiar with the layouts of the building and the justification of it. And we could definitely have more meetings on discussing the reasonings for it and how other departments have set up their newer buildings. But we do need to start thinking ahead and thinking about what we would like to conclude the meeting with. We do need to have a little bit more discussion on the two sites. That way we can either give an answer to the Board of Selectmen or tell them we may need more time. I think we do have to go back and kind of visit the two sites. The cost analysis between the two, there's really very minimal difference between the two sites. So choosing one side or the other isn't really necessarily based off of cost so much as it is the current situation of the sites and the potential for the sites. So does anybody else in the committee have anything that they'd like to talk about or bring up so we can try to formulate an idea of how we want to end this meeting?
Well, I think we ought to probably present the position of having the North School torn down.
Well, I think that's something that already has been discussed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the surplus committee already presented that as a suggestion to the Board of Selectmen last year. But I think that no matter what, I think that building is supposed to be torn down unless we sell the property and then it gets torn down by somebody else. If somebody can correct me.
I think it was left in question. There was no decision made on the school, either school, both North or Central.
Right, there was no decision made. There was just a couple of ideas of what could go there. We all just threw in some not threw in, but we all came up with ideas, either open space or fire department or senior housing. So, and then the chair of the committee decided that we should pretty much leave it up to the selectmen. So that's just
the selectmen
what the charge was.
I was under the impression that I thought the selectmen did make a vote that the building was
And it was to demolish it. Like that's what most of them said, that whatever happened with it, everybody on my committee, except for me, said that we should definitely demolish it, no matter what.
Yeah, didn't we agree that they were a threat to public safety in their current condition? Because they wouldn't be able to be used for senior housing because they're dilapidated and there's damage to the mortar and they're structurally unsafe?
I don't know because I'm not a construction person, but I just know from seeing other towns in the past that they have converted older buildings to senior housing or condos. So yes, you were on the committee too, Jared, so you just as much.
We included the North School study in this feasibility study. It's kind of a favor to the Board of Selectmen to answer this question, whether this is ultimately the site chosen or not. We knew that the feasibility study would be looking at the 2 fire stations and doing an asbestos study and a structural study. At the time, and actually in actuality, the North School site is one of the potential sites. So we needed to know what the cost would be if the fire station were to be built there. We'd have to at least know what the cost is to remove that. So at the very least, as a part of this document, we have an estimated cost to remove the asbestos and actually demolish the building. And you can probably double that if you included Center School because they're twin buildings, whether they're part of this project or not. So at least that answer is there. At least now the town should have a fairly accurate cost estimate to remove those 2 buildings, whether they're part of this project or not.
Well, that brings up a good point, Chief. If they aren't part of if the Glenowitz Way site is the preferred site, if it's the site that we decide on, it does make the North School and Center School surplus as well to the town. Not directly part of this project, but it makes it surplus to the town, as opposed to if we built on that, then it would be part of the project and there would be one less surplus lot for the town to recoup anything from.
I don't think you can see the town vote or go for tearing down both schools at the same time because of the cost, and especially the way the economy is right now too. That's not going to be an
Right.
easy task.
I don't see it as a priority, but
And if somebody wanted Center School, they could potentially tear it down themselves or rebuild or, take parts of it, basically, or the whole school and
the
then
Center School is
expand on
really
it.
not part of. It's not really has anything to do with this. So the only part of the North School was just because it's one of the selected sites. What happens
Right.
to the North School, I guess, really wouldn't matter. But
But the 2 fire stations should probably sell pretty quickly. I mean, Route 18, those would become surplus, and I would
I'm sure that those would be surplus lots.
sell in a minute.
I know we're under the clock here, so I apologize, but yes, my question is, what are we looking to do here? I mean, what are we asking the selectmen for? As a committee, we can take and evaluate, it sounds like the North School site or the Glenowitz Way site. I am amazed that the delta is only like $810,000 between the 2. If you look at that for value, obviously the Glenowitz Way site, in my position, would be the way to go, assuming that we can get by the obstacle of, as Jim described, the wetland issue and the access road. Above and beyond that, I'm still confused. What is the committee looking to do now? Make a recommendation to the selectmen that we continue to investigate the site, Glenowitz Way, I'll just say Glenowitz Way site? Are we looking for them to appropriate money so that we can do design development and construction documentation with the designer? And if so, we don't have a dollar value for that. And if we do get to that next stage, I think that would be the appropriate time that the town also retain the services of an OPM to guide us through that process, because it is a lengthy process and time consuming. So somebody should give me some direction. What are we doing?
Well, I guess ultimately we need to come up with a decision on how we want to present this to the Board of Selectmen. When this project started, there was a good timeline for us to get this study in time, have time for us to discuss, really go in deep with this, and then present it to the Board of Selectmen and the town manager for them to discuss and then talk about the next process would be to look at getting onto town meeting, and then from there going to the next process. But because of everything going on in the world, we kind of got delayed on getting this, and now we're kind of on a time crunch for the selectmen are right now trying to figure out what they're going to be doing with town meeting. So I don't really know what the next steps are going to be. This is interesting times for us, but at the end of the day, the study still came out. We still have to do our job and give them something. It's just we're kind of put in a little bit of a time constraint here. I know that
Unfortunately, yeah.
in our past meetings, we've all come to the agreement that yes, something should be done. How fast that's going to happen, really nobody knows.
Do we vote on which site we like?
I think what we should do is probably, if the difference in cost between them, we should decide on which site we like, and then they're all in a general ballpark of cost. So if we just pick the site and presented that to the Board of Selectmen, maybe they might be willing to work on trying to get this on a town meeting now or later. But at least it gives us the opportunity to present them with a general idea. If this is what the general cost, and this is in comparison to other stations that have been built throughout the state, especially the ones that we went to go visit, this is generally the ballpark of cost and size. I think we just really need to decide on a site. So,
All right, let's vote.
Okay, I'll vote.
Somebody really,
It's a decision you have to make to pick a site.
somebody
I
should,
have no problem making a motion that we pick the North School site for the site of the fire department.
Okay, I make the motion that we pick the Glenowitz Way site for the fire department.
okay,
so what we
You have two motions.
I don't want to go Robert's rules here, but if somebody's made a motion,
Yeah, you got to second it.
yeah. So Jim, you made a motion. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second for the purpose of discussion
Okay.
because I would not vote for that site. The size of the lot, it's just too small. It doesn't allow for expansion. The traffic's going to be awful. If we have this Glenowitz Way site and we can do it, I just don't see any disadvantages other than the fact that 2 times a day there'll be traffic along Glenowitz Way. But after the chief said we let the traffic out, if we get a call and we hit that button and we start that green light and we put a red light at the other end, that traffic will pretty much be gone by the time we turn out, get to the trucks, get in the trucks, get the trucks out. So second for the first discussion, but feel free to discuss.
I mean, I'll go off of that. I feel like since the two sites really don't have a big difference in cost, I'd hate to landlock us into a smaller site and jeopardize the future of the department not being able to grow or expand when there's a larger site out there. I feel like the traffic issue is the one major issue for the Glenowitz Way site, but I feel like there's a short-term and long-term solution to that. But that would be my point on that.
I also, well, I say no to the North School location because I live in the area and I see the traffic and I don't think it's going to be beneficial at all. I definitely am for the Glenowitz Way though, and I think that the traffic is going to ease up. I think that you guys have a good plan. So no, I say no to.
Oh, any other discussion on the motion?
I just think that the environmental issues on the Glenwood site are going to be a significant factor in if you go to develop on that site. That's my opinion. I've known that land for a long time. I just know you're going to have issues.
And anybody else? So the motion on the floor is to propose the North School site as the selected site. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
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 All right, so does that automatically, the motion goes with 1 for the proposal of the North School with 4 nays. Does that automatically make the Glenowitz Way site the preferred site, or do we need to make a motion to
Need-
make it official? Or make a motion to have
Need
discussion.
to make a motion and take a formal vote because
Yeah, for the purpose of clarity, I'll make a motion to utilize the Glenowitz Way site as the future site for the fire department.
I'll second it.
All right, the motion been second. Any discussion on the motion?
so once again, I'm going to express my concern, and I think Jim's concern as well. I'm still concerned about the environmental aspects of it, and I'm concerned about the access in and out of this, well, out of the site, not so much in the site, but out of the site. But that being said, the delta is so small and the potential value is there. That would probably be my vote for additional investigation until we had those two issues somewhat resolved or have more confidence in the direction. That was a long answer, huh?
Well, I mean, it's because it does, listen,
Makes sense.
both sites have their cons and they are both there, but like you said, if the cost difference is that much, I feel like any problem can probably be overcome. But I also think that this is just also a recommendation. I mean, anything can still happen, but to at least give them a good direction on the way that the pros on this site outweigh the pros on the other site.
So I just want to come back to, I know the chief stated it before, the conditions of the two existing Abington stations. If you've not had the privilege of walking through them, you would realize the need, the must-have, that we have to replace those facilities. I mean, it's almost, I don't want, not a reflection on the personnel, but it's an embarrassment to the town that we ask our first responders to work in facilities like I've toured. And so I am wholeheartedly want to move ahead with pursuing that Glenowitz Way, assuming it's going to work. And that the chief said it well, it's not going to get cheaper in the future. It is a big dollar sign. However, this is a feasibility study. There's still lots of opportunity that the committee and the town can take and do some value engineering on those numbers and maybe getting them to a point where the town will be receptive to the dollar value, whatever it is. But if we don't look around at what's happening right now with our first responders and nurses and everybody else, I don't know what it's going to take, but I was
Right.
wholeheartedly in favor of this even before these pandemic situations. So
Yeah,
To piggyback off of Roger, I actually was against this. So in the beginning, I thought that you guys should be, I didn't see your fire stations. This was just, just thinking of the area that you were already in on Route 18 and that there was probably a way to expand. But after seeing the fire stations and talking with you guys and seeing everything, I am definitely for a fire station. I know that it's well deserved and it needed basically. And I like the idea of Glenowitz. So I don't know. I think that hopefully the town will agree with us.
any other discussion on the motion? All right, then we'll make a vote. All those in favor for the Glenowitz Way site to be the preferred site for recommendation, signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed?
Opposed?
All right, 4 ayes to 1 opposed. So we can at least have some sort of recommendation to present to the Board of Selectmen. Thank you guys all for being a part of this, and KBA, thank you very much for taking the time to explain all this to everybody. And thank you for the words that everybody said. The fire department does, the people that have gotten the chance to actually come to the station and see what it is, we do what we can with what we have, and we're doing the best, and we're doing the job well. We really are, especially during these trying times. We're working harder. We're going through some unique situations, and it's been interesting. So I'd just like to thank you guys for those words that you had to say. So we do only have a short amount of time. Is there anything else
Can you tell me, Derek, do you know when this would be presented to the selectmen?
I know that they are having a meeting next week on Tuesday, so it's coming up only in 5 days. I would suspect that they may ask myself and maybe the chief to speak with them while they're on their meeting. So it'd be nice to at least be able to say that we have a recommendation for a site and that the study is still out there and there's still a lot to digest, but at least we'd be able to give them a preferred site, but a preferred site, and there's those several different options for the design of the building. But those being a small change in cost, I guess they're kind of all in a general area. I don't think we need to give them a direct hard number right now. I think the biggest thing was location.
You could send
Well,
me,
I don't,
let me know when that meeting is. I'd probably like to dial in.
Yeah, I believe it's going to be Tuesday night, but I will find out.
I'll check the town website then. Thank you.
Folks,
don't
I just
think
want to
there's
thank everybody for your time on this as well. There was a lot of work on this, and certainly in-house was a lot of work on this. And, you know, I'm not sure where it's going to go, but at least this portion of it's complete. And I think we can push it forward one way or the other for the history of the town. We'll see where it goes ultimately. But I just want to thank everybody again for your efforts on this, and we'll see where it goes. Ironically, as Roger said, we're one of the busiest departments over the last couple of months, as well as Marty, the Board of Health, the police certainly, but my department, our paramedics, excuse me, really have borne the brunt of the bulk of the workload in the last couple of months for this town. And ironically, we're in the oldest, smallest buildings in town getting all of this done. We're doing it, certainly. There has been unbelievable challenges that we're not even going to share with you, but at this point, knock on wood, we've had no exposures. We're very proud of that. And we were able to get around it, but it's been difficult. So thank you for this.
Chief, thank you for your hard work and all the members of the
Definitely.
department. Thank you very much. It doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
I don't think there's anything we need to give to the selectmen for creating an article for town meeting, so I think it's just what we voted on tonight. Keep them informed of what we're doing.
I mean, if we have the opportunity to be fortunate enough to go to town meeting, we would be able to give a presentation and explain in depth. And obviously, there's still some time where we can get some information out there. I mean, there is a lot to digest, but the meat and potatoes of this study showed the 2 sites and the cost. But there was a lot in there, especially if people have questions about the current station. The KVA did a great job on the study of going in depth in there. We didn't really talk about it so much because we knew we've already seen a lot of it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions for anybody in the future that has them. So,
Derek, can you mention the website?
Yeah, so there is a website that part of the study actually comes with a website that, and thank you, Chief. I actually, that slipped my mind. So there is a website, and maybe Sean, we have a couple more minutes. Maybe you can mention it, but there is a site that was designed that we'll be able to get out there and share, and that will have the study and all this information on there that we can make readily accessible to everybody, probably by beginning of next week, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the site is. But yes, what Derek's mentioned. So we have the site, and it has all the information of what we've been gathering over the last 4 or 5 months. Pretty much it's all in this report. But we have the hazardous materials reports. We'll have photographs. We'll have everything that we've gathered to date. So it'll be utilized for you, the town. They can put it on Facebook, put it on whatever social media is. Get it out there. So it'll be a very quick way to utilize the information that we've gathered for you guys. Trying to find it, I could pull it up. But
We're going to make sure the fire department Facebook page has a link to that as well.
Yeah,
We'll make sure we have that connection.
Yeah, I will make sure that once it's all updated and has all the current stuff on it, I think what we'll do is we'll get that out there right away. So we'll make that accessible. Any other questions, comments?
Motion to adjourn.
Second on the motion, anybody?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.